Okay, so hello, Nancy. So lovely to meet you. How are you doing?
Fine, and you?
Yeah, good. I feel quite honoured that this is my first transatlantic Zoom call, and it's with you, so that's very nice. So thanks for agreeing to be part of this sort of virtual interview series, which will be put up on the Instagram for sort of hear what we chat about. I don't know if you, just to start, want to sort of introduce yourself to anyone who watches this video, explain your business, what you do, and the work that you produce.
Okay, let me stop you for a moment
Okay.
because there's some weird sound feedback. Are you hearing that?
Oh no, it's all good my end. There's
Okay, as long as it's good on your end, because I just don't want it to be awful for your listeners.
the virtual age. Yeah, it's good my end, so I'm hoping the recording will come out all right.
Okay.
Fingers crossed.
Okay.
But yeah, so like, tell us about yourself.
I'm Nancy Hiller, and I am American by birth. I was born in South Florida, and when I was 11, my mother and father split up, and my mother took my sister and me, and we ended up living in England. So I was there for 16 years and went to middle school and high school and started university and dropped out of university just because it didn't make sense to me. I mean, I loved what I was studying and I was very interested and did nothing but work on my studies, but I didn't really see how it fit into the bigger picture of the world to be studying Hebrew and Aramaic at Cambridge. And so I ended up moving with my boyfriend at the time out to a little village called Friday Bridge in Cambridgeshire, where my mother and stepfather had bought a house, and we rented a little cottage next to them, and I just started cobbling together bits of furniture for us, and I had no idea what I was doing or how to use tools, and my stepfather constantly made fun of me and insulted me, and one day he said, "You should take a carpentry course." And he said it not so much to encourage me, but as an insult. So, because we really did not get along at all, I took him up on that. It became a dare for me, and rode my bike down to the nearest vocational school, which was the Isle of Ely College in Wisbech, and ended up in the City and Guilds furniture making course. So I did the first year of that, the basic certificate, and I was a little older than the other students, so I really needed to make money. I couldn't just stay in school. So I left. I mean, I graduated from the first year, and then thought I would set up my own business, and I wanted to find workshop space where I could also live, and so I put an ad in a local newspaper, and it was answered by a man named Roy Griffiths, who was had recently started up a kitchen cabinet making company and design company, selling out of his shop front in I don't remember. It was near the King's Road, I think. And I mean, I never went to the shop front. I was always based in Cambridgeshire. So he hired me to work in his workshop, and that was my start, my first official job as a furniture maker. And because he was running a kitchen cabinet company, that was what we focused on there. And ever since, kitchens have been a part of my career as a furniture maker.
Yeah, it sounds like really invaluable experience. I think from my own experiences, going to Wood College, we learned mostly just how to make freestanding stuff, and actually everyone says like money's in the kitchen. So yeah, that was probably a good move to start there. And do you enjoy doing the kitchens? Is that like, do you have a passion?
Well, I enjoy kitchens and freestanding furniture. I mean, part of what I really enjoy about kitchens is that I love houses. And so working on a kitchen enables me to contribute materially to the interior of a house. And every kitchen I do is different. I don't have a style in which I work. What I specialize in is responding sensitively and in a sophisticated, knowledgeable way to the context, and taking my clients' preferences, both aesthetic and in terms of how they want their kitchen to function, into great consideration. So I enjoy it partly because every job is quite different from the others.
That was a great introduction, so thank you. I think at this point I'll then mention that the reason I found out about you and your work was through the book that you wrote called Making Things Matter. And I've got the copy here. It's backed in like some jazzy paper just to keep the white book nice and clean. And it was lent to me by my tutor from college, who I'm still in touch with. And I finished it right at the beginning of lockdown. So it seems quite fitting to be having this chat with you. And in that, it's like, I really like the style of the book because it's very anecdotal, and you kind of weave stories about your career and projects that you've worked on with sort of stories from your personal life and things that were going on whilst you were sort of growing up. So you've kind of already mentioned that the thing that sparked you to go into furniture making was your stepdad sort of making that comment. Do you feel like that's a kind of theme that's thread throughout your career, kind of maybe doing things to prove a point? Or, you know?
To prove a point, yeah. I have to confess, yes. That is a powerful motivation. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. Same here. Yeah, so I'll just read a little extract from your book that I've made note of. My attitude played a huge part. I considered my work a stopgap, something I was doing to support myself until I figured out what I should be doing with my life. Preferably something in an office where I use my mind, spend my days engaging with fellow human beings. So it kind of sounds like furniture obviously wasn't the initial thing you were interested in. I don't know, do you explain like that extract and kind of your thought process there?
Well, I was brought up with, I mean, there were never any express expectations of me. You know, my parents didn't say, no, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, you should do this, we expect you to do this. So it wasn't that, but there are always sort of unexpressed, implicit cultural expectations, even if they aren't explicit, in any family, I think. And the clear expectation, the idea was clearly that I would go to university and who knows, you know, I guess get some kind of a job. But my parents had both come from families where they were expected to do specific things. You know, this is what your life needs to look like in order to be successful, and I think that's clearly why they didn't want to impose those kind of expectations on my sister and me. So that was kind of them, and at the same time it left us sort of with this sense of, well, I guess we're supposed to do what we're interested in, but you know, it can take a while to figure out what you're sufficiently interested in to really work at it and maintain it as a career. And the other thing is, we always, my sister and I, had to support ourselves. I mean, after we left home, I think it was pretty much at the age of 17, I was still doing my A-levels, and then took a year off for before college, and had a job, just a clerical job. But you know, you're in this situation where for many years during my younger days, I was doing a job, any job that I could find just to pay the bills, and not really having any kind of clear sense of where I might be going in life. And one of the things that appealed to me once I got into woodworking, you know, in my training, I liked being in, I will say I enjoyed the fact that it was a traditionally men's field, and part of the reason I enjoyed that was, I mean, we're talking several decades ago. I am now 61, and at the time there was still this very powerful unspoken sense that what men did was more important than what women did. And at least that was part of the message I got culturally growing up from the broader culture in which I grew up. And so the fact that I could work in this man's line of work, which it still was very much, just sort of came with its own implicit seal of success. Like, okay, this is worthy work because it's what men do, which I hate to say now, because looking back, I realize, of course, my God, women's work is foundational. I mean, you know, for so long there's been this disparagement of women's work in the home, but my God, if women didn't have children, there wouldn't be anything, right? And if they didn't take care of babies and cook meals and stuff, and I'm not saying that these are uniquely female things, although having children, giving birth still is pretty much, but it's the work within the home continues to be underappreciated, and we see that today during the pandemic. I mean, the caretakers, people who care for others, are very much in this country underpaid, underappreciated, and not always treated with the same consideration for their safety and welfare as others. But so, okay, so, but even though I was happy to have gained entry into this male-dominated, traditionally male field, where I was building things that would go in other people's houses, I still felt very keenly aware that it was, I was still working in a manual trade. And now this is 1980, 1981. Today it's all the rage, right? It's, you know, shortly after I got into furniture making, I can't remember who it is. Was it one of Lord Snowden's sons became a furniture maker? And I am telling you, I heard about that, and it definitely elevated the sense that, okay, so working with your hands is not just for people who couldn't cut it academically. And it seems pathetic to say that that meant a lot to me, and I imagine other people in the trades, but it did, because this is long before it became understood that, in fact, people working in the trades, whether or not they did their A-levels or went to university, also have their own kinds of intelligence. And, you know, again, the trades have long been disparaged because they haven't been seen as a realm where people who could succeed intellectually and professionally would want to work. And so, so I always sort of had this pull, even as I was working in a cabinet shop, I had this sense that, well, this might be fine for now, but it isn't really what I should be doing with my life, because I should be using my mind. I need to interact with people. Honestly, for so many years, I found working with, even if I was in a shop situation, I've only worked in one shop situation, and that was after I moved back to the States in 1987, in which there were women. The rest of my career, I was always just working with men in rural workshops where there was quite a, not a feminist culture. Although I have to hand it to Roy Griffiths, my first employer, I would call him a good feminist. And that's partly because he is married to a wonderful woman, Mimi. And so I always had this sense that I need to probably go back to college, to university. And so I sort of went between working in cabinet and furniture making shops and stints in other work situations, such as an office at Reading University, and then later on, after returning to the States, I found my way back into university, and that has turned out to be perfect for me. And I have to give some credit to the internet, I guess, because being able to combine using my mind in more abstract ways that aren't just focused on the work at hand day by day, but to think about larger issues and concerns, and being able to write about those things, whether in books or articles or blog posts, that has really it has created for me a kind of community that I really missed and still miss. I mean, when I'm working by myself day after day in the workshop, you cut a few hundred mortises or dovetails and you're like, okay, so it's the same thing I've been doing for years, and it can get depressingly monotonous. And so I find it absolutely essential to bear the big picture in mind, think about what I'm working towards. Yes, you've got this stack of drawer sides that all have to have dovetails cut in them, but they're going to be part of this kitchen or this dresser. And so having a career in this field in which I have worked, it has been the bulk of my career, and it is my livelihood, and has been for more than a quarter of a century. So I have found it absolutely essential to perform these kind of mental gymnastics. That is, I'm constantly having to reframe what's going on and how I fit into the world in order to motivate myself and maintain my interest. Because I think we all have to do that no matter what field we work in. I just think it's, at least, maybe there are some people who just, can live in some, I don't know, simpler mental universe, that simple being a good thing, but I can't. And so I'm constantly having to recalibrate so that I enhance my own happiness, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that leads quite well on to the next thing I wanted to ask you, which was, I think I'm very much like you. I can't compartmentalise my work because it bleeds so much into my personal life and lifestyle, which you can see as a positive and a negative. And I have a lot of friends who, they have a 9 to 5 job, they go to work, and then they live for the weekend. Whereas I tried that after uni, and I found it really I kind of struggled with it because on top of doing the 9 to 5, was trying to do my own stuff on the side to break up the monotony and just kind of feel like I had some sort of control over what I was putting out into the world and what work I was doing. So the question is based on an extract again that I took from the book, which is hilarious. It's honey, you can masturbate to your heart's content on your own time, but you shouldn't expect your customers to pay you for it. It was a painful but important lesson, which is like the end of an anecdote where you perhaps overcharged somebody because you took more time to make it than they were expecting. So in light of that, how much should this career be a lifestyle, and how much pleasure should we derive from our work, or expect what's realistically expected? Does that make sense?
Well, I think I understand what you're getting at, but if this doesn't address it the way that you're hoping, just feel free to let me know. I mean, whenever you go into a creative field, there's the temptation to, I'm not quite sure how to put it. You want to give the work your all. You want to really express yourself through your work. And that means in terms of doing your best, in terms of skills, in terms of design, in terms of artistry. And, but when you're working for someone, whether it be an employer or a client on a custom commission, you have to respect what that person is willing to pay for. I mean, it really is all about the relationship you have with that person as well. And if you want to, in that case that you were referring to from the book, Making Things Work, I had decided I was so excited about the commission, which was a built-in for this lovely Victorian house in Bloomington. I really went overboard on making it really, I thought, fit into the house in ways that were more labor intensive than their budget had allowed for. And it was a huge lesson for me when they refused to pay the bill. It really was. I mean, these people have become very dear friends over the years, but that was definitely one of the hardest lessons I've had, because I was living alone. It was only my income that was paying mortgage and all of the other bills, and I needed to get paid, and here I had gone way overboard, indulging my creativity in designing and building this piece for them, and when they refused to pay the extra amount, that meant basically I lost that money, which was about $1,500, and this is like almost 25 years ago. That was even more money than it was more of a chunk of money, more significant than it might be today. And so, as I say, sometimes when you work for yourself, one of the great liberating things I think about self-employment is you literally have no one else to blame but yourself. And so when I have experiences such as that one, I think to myself, I have to learn from this. You know, that is a constructive response. I have to learn from this. And any kind of education costs money, requires an investment. So I'm going to have to think of this as part of my education. And that's part of why I wrote that book, Making Things Work, just because I've learned a lot over the years that I think can benefit a lot of other people. And I didn't want it to be a, you know, an overtly educational book. I wanted it to be entertaining and funny and poignant. And so I wrote it as anecdotes, but underlying all of it is the desire to explain, to make clear to new furniture makers and other woodworkers hoping to make a living by this work that, you know, the fantasies that some schools and training programs rely on to recruit people, they all are grounded in reality. I mean, there's so much to love about this work, but I felt that too few people had been willing to be honest about the less lovable realities of the work, such as when you end up working with very difficult clients, or clients who basically, in this case that you cited, say they held me to what I had agreed to do for them. And I had violated the agreement. It wasn't my intention, but I had. And so you're constantly learning, and yeah.
Yeah, I know that I don't know if you've ever met her, but Helen Welch, I know that you know of her. She runs, Helen Welch, she runs the London.
Oh yes, Helen.
Yeah, and I interviewed her like a year ago, so, and she, in the interview, said every student that she has come to her wood school who has the intention of becoming a furniture maker for their career, she sits them down and has the talk with them, because she's like, I really need to instill in them like what the realities are. And I think, like, from my own experiences, I'm going through this. Well, I'm going through this kind of mid-20s life crisis, which I think a lot of people go through when they've left university, because you kind of leave that safe hub of like creativity and support. You know, it's probably more inclusive than other work environments, and so I think, like, at university, I was really confident, encouraged, and really engaged in what I was doing. Had like a real vision and purpose. And then I left that kind of safety and security, and now I'm kind of facing, like, yes, the financial realities of the industry, but as well as that, like, feeling like my work is my vision for my work is not really valued, or there's not a place for it, or I don't know, just like struggling with all of these kind of expectations and perceptions, which I've emailed you about, and that was something we were going to discuss. So we finally got onto that topic now. So yeah, I don't know, like, have you ever felt like you've gone through throughout your career a kind of a point where you maybe like stopped and reflected, or felt like you'd hit a brick wall and you just thought, what am I doing? Should I stop this? Like, you recall a moment where
I have to apologize. The sound is, I think it's because my phone is sitting in a measuring cup to hold it upright. Okay, can you just repeat your question?
Okay, I'll summarize it.
Much better.
Okay, so I'm currently...
Maybe I'll hold the phone.
Okay, you can hear me all
okay.
right. So I'm currently going through a bit of a mid-20s crisis, and I just wondered if you've ever gone through a similar situation. I feel it's exasperated by the whole COVID thing. I've had way too much time to ruminate on it. But can you recall a time from your life where perhaps hit a bit more, and how did you
Oh, totally. I mean, that was certainly the first thing, was when I was working for Roy Griffiths in his workshop in Wisbech. And at that point, I mean, I can't remember, I think I was there for 2.5 years. And he was slowly growing his business and hiring more and more people. And the work, even though he very kindly allowed me to focus on these decorative dressers for the most part, that when they were upper cabinets, and they were all different from each other, and it was fun work. But I just started to feel as though I was part of a cog in a machine. And I was in my early 20s at the time. And that was when I first decided, yeah, what is this? How does this fit into the world? And is this what I really want to do for the rest of my life? And so that was when my boyfriend at the time and we got married, and we ended up moving, and that was when I went and took an office job at Reading University Students Union. And that was fabulous, because I went from working in this freezing cold barn workshop, working with material, to an office that was very comfortable and had all women colleagues. They were fantastic. We are still friends to this day, like almost 40 years later. We recently had a reunion when I was in England a couple of years ago, and it was great. But again, after a couple of years, I started to feel like, okay, now I've got this. It was student travel and faculty travel, and Reading was at the time, maybe still is, very much an agricultural, they had a lot of agricultural departments, so there were students and faculty members from all over Africa and India, and it was fabulously diverse, and it was an interesting place to work for a while. But after I had, mastered the basics of the work, I was like, okay, so now we're just selling tickets. And I mean, I just got, I hate to say bored with it, but in the end, I just felt like, okay, I need something different now. And then to cut a long story short, the next couple of years were sort of a slow-moving train wreck of my personal relationship, my marriage, which I basically broke up, and then went back into woodworking, working for a small workshop in the countryside near Royston. So, I will say I didn't have a strong sense that, okay, now this is what I should be doing in my life. But I had to make a living, and there is a certain comfort to be taken from having a job that allows you to pay your basic expenses. I mean, again, I do a lot of mental, psychological gymnastics, I think, in my constant effort to feel like, okay, this is good. This is workable, I can be happy with this, at least for a while. And I was sharing a house with some lovely people, and it was all very sort of rough and tumble. I was being paid very little, but it was workable. It was a rich time of education for me personally. And that was also when I finally learned to drive. I have been, if there is a theme in my life, it is that I get myself into these situations sort of unconsciously in which I am compelled to do something that I have long resisted. And after riding my bicycle in all weather to get to work at that place. It was just so miserable. I just finally decided I have got to learn to drive, and I was 26 or 27, I think, when I got my driver's license. I had successfully put it off far longer than most people at the time. So yeah, you know, I think that that's another dimension to human life that sometimes we don't give enough credit to, that is this subconscious side that's motivating us. And in my case, I recognize now that I often I work myself into specific situations that I wouldn't have consciously chosen, because then I will be compelled to do something. And again, I take a certain deep pleasure in being compelled, because there's a sort of liberation from it. You're not in a situation where, I mean, you can always say, no, I will not do this, I don't want to do this. But realistically and reasonably, you pretty much have to do certain things at certain times. And I'm probably going off topic, but I'm kind of not, because this really is all related to my answer to your question about being a person in your 20s and having these sort of existential crises. I just think that's part of human life. I think some people put it off. So for example, some people go into some form of training, such as medicine, that extends well through their 20s, or a doctoral program. And so they're in that same kind of somewhat sheltered, but often brutal educational, institutional environment that can make you feel safe, and it provides expectations, it provides positive feedback if you're doing well. And all of those things are easy to take for granted until you get out and you start working without them. And then I think many of us realize, oh, wow, that was a real gift to have those expectations and that nurturing environment, even if the nurturing sometimes comes in the form of criticism. So does that answer your, does that address what you were interested in?
Yeah, I think, again, you touched on something I was going to ask about, like I highlighted another passage from a book, which was all about the subconscious force leading you, and in spite of yourself, to create the very circumstances that have kept me from anything else. So yeah, and I think I've had discussions about this kind of topic with other makers of my sort of age, and I think a lot of the time it just comes down to confidence and kind of just, you know, having faith in your abilities, and kind of, you know, because when you're in like a learning environment, that confidence comes from having structure and tutors and classmates around you. Whereas when you leave that environment, you have to kind of create that all for yourself, and the world's massive and there's so much potential to do anything. So trying to create some form of for yourself, so a massive challenge. So yeah, it's kind of frustrating that the answer is just like, be confident, or like, you know, suck it up and get on with it. But that kind of, I guess, is the reality. But I mean, would you agree with my summing up there? Or,
well, I would say another thing that I've found, another device that has been helpful to me, is to give an example. When I was in my mid-40s and I was running my current business, and I had my employee, Daniel O'Grady, and I would get these, like at one point I got a call out of the blue from a woman who said she had found me on the internet and was interested in asking about doing their kitchen, and they were in Washington, D.C. And I was like, okay, sure. And I mean, I don't really like traveling. And I was living on my own, you know, there wasn't the sort of comfort of a partner and just sort of existential comfort, you know, and I would just find, okay, so I had to go meet these people and look at their kitchen, which meant flying from Indianapolis to Washington, well, Baltimore, rent a car, drive to their place. You know, I spent the night with some friends from Indiana who had moved to Washington, D.C. for work. And I just felt like, what am I doing? This is so strange. I mean, at that time, I charged people for an out-of-town visit of that sort. I just charged them for the travel expenses, not for my time. And I just thought, what am I doing? You know, this is so strange. Am I even going to get this job? And then I did. So I had to go back a couple of other times on preliminary visits before we drove all the cabinetry there to install it. And I just started to think to myself, okay, I would feel anxiety as I was walking, you know, to get on the plane at the airport. And I would just tell myself, let it go. You can't afford the anxiety. Don't question yourself. This is your job. Pretend like you're working for someone else. And so I sort of created this, not fantasy, but I would just tell myself, pretend that you are the employee, not the boss. And it was sort of this, you know, because you are, when you have an employee, you are working for that employee as well as yourself and your customers, because that employee's livelihood is in your hands. And so I would just tell myself, this is my job. There was a certain sense of safety in that. You know, it was like mentally recreating that nurturing, safe environment of school. It's like, okay, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that all of us throughout life, or maybe not all, maybe some people are blessedly free of anxieties, but most of my friends, you know, have similar and other anxieties, and whatever it takes, you know, that's not harmful to anyone, to create the sense that, no, this is good, this is what you're doing, this is actually, some people would think that what you're doing is cool, and so maybe you should start thinking of it that way. I mean, it's just a constant sort of process of learning to work with the circumstances in which you find yourself, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way. I'm definitely going to remember the employee kind of thing. I'm going to be saying it to myself now. Cool. I've got 2 more questions, and hopefully we'll run out of time. I feel like maybe we've got another 10 minutes left. But, so next question was, like during COVID, like how have you found the lockdown? I mean, obviously you're in the States, which I'm sure is a completely different situation from here. Like, I don't know if you're still working, like how's it impacted day to day, and like in light of all these changes and having time to think and reflect, do you think this will change how you move forward and will continue to work?
Okay, well, some of that did not, for some reason, the audio coming to me from you is often very broken up. So I think you're getting at how has the current situation due to the pandemic changed my work experience, and do I see any changes as a result of it going forward? Is that what you were asking? Okay, so I work alone in my workshop on a daily basis, so it didn't change that. But the thing is that whatever I'm working on is for customers in their house. And so one of the big jobs right now has been a set of kitchen cabinets. And when we had our lockdown begin, I just stopped working in the shop because I realized I was just ready to start cutting the material and building the cabinets. And I realized there's no telling when the job site will be ready now and when these can go in. And if I start building them, it's quite a lot of cabinets for this job. If I start building them, I'm just going to fill my workshop. And, you know, it's not big enough to have all that work in it for a long time just sitting there waiting to be delivered. Aside from the fact that it's unpleasant to work in it when it's that full, it's also risky to have that much finished work just sitting around, you know. And so, I mean, I always worry about, you know, the cat might damage something, the shop cat, or what if there were a flood or something. So, so I really did take a few weeks. My husband is a general contractor. I don't know what the word for that is over there. A builder, you know, and a carpenter. And he has 2 employees, or had, and works in people's houses also. And so he was even more concerned about exposing clients to risk from having people working in their homes, and also exposing his employees and himself, you know. And so we both just really took a few weeks to I mean, I always have writing work. Actually, that is when I started writing my series of profiles for the Lost Art Press blog, because I decided, okay, I have to be constructive in responding to this situation, because I can't stand not to be. And in any kind of a crisis, you've got to, you know, summon whatever courage and strength you can. And because you know that other people are also feeling concerned. And I thought, what can I do that would be helpful? And so I started interviewing people to ask and asking, aside from how did you get into this field, and what do you do and all the rest of it, how are you responding to this moment? And so for me, writing those profiles became one very important way that I could respond and make clear to many other woodworkers around the world, here's how these people are responding. You know, if, for example, some of them, such as Helen Welch, they teach woodworking. So how are they dealing with this moment? So again, to answer your question, part of my response has been to, if I couldn't see people in person, at least I could interact with them by interviewing them, you know, and sharing their stories and experiences, many of which are really fascinating, with others. So that was one way of responding. And then there are very, you know, the prosaic things. So yeah, we've been wearing a mask. Whenever we're around other people, we wear masks, and we keep our distance. We haven't been socializing in person at all, which is really bizarre, because ordinarily we would be going to friends' homes for dinner and having them over, or I would be meeting people for coffee, you know, to talk about work. And so there's been none of that. And also every event. I mean, I had a conference and exhibition of work in February in Asheville at the Grove Park Inn Arts and Crafts Conference, and that was the last one. Since then, everything on my schedule for the year has been canceled. So things are quite different, and that is the way it has to be right now. Since then, I have, the past several weeks, I've been back working as usual in my workshop, and the job site where these cabinets will be going is one of my husband's jobs. So he has been back to work, and his employee he only has one right now. And what he has done is, for his part, he's made a point of staggering the work so that there would only be one crew on the job at a time. So he and his employee might be doing something, and then the next day the plumbers would come in and do the rough-in plumbing, and the next day the electricians would come in. That kind of thing, just whereas ordinarily we would all be working together. Our situation is a little different from that of many people, in that we're in a small university town, the university has pretty much been, the campus has been closed since March, and it is getting ready to reopen for classes in person. And I don't remember whether it's 30 or 40,000 students will be coming to town in 2 weeks, which is, I have to say, if you are asking about our response to COVID-19, I have started putting in every proposal I write to prospective customers. I will wear a mask while I am working in your house, and everyone in the house will wear a mask. We will keep distance, and we will minimize the number of people in the house at any given time. And I am also now asking people, it might sound, I know some people will think I'm discriminating against young people and university students, and that is not my point. It's just that sociologically, Indiana University, which is our local university, it has long allowed itself to be characterized as a party school. And Bloomington is now considered one of the likely hotspots for COVID-19 because of the situation vis-a-vis the university and how many people in the larger community are employed at the university, and how many will be going onto and then off of campus on a daily basis, etc. So all of this is a consideration and factors into how I am planning to work in the coming months. And because I think it's just so important, it's not a matter of fear, it's a matter of taking responsibility as a member of a community. And so, yeah, it's all in my mind constantly, and I am trying to be responsible and minimize my contact with members of our species in person, and continuing my series of interviews and profiles for the Lost Art Press blog.
Yeah, I think it sounds as if I've come to a similar coping strategy by reaching out to people and organising these Zoom interviews. So yeah, I think that was my realisation, was like the best way to cope was just to reach out to people, try and maintain some sense of normalcy. And so that leads on to my final question. Hopefully we've only got, I think, only a few minutes left, so we won't take up much more time. But so in light of the discussion and your own experiences, and you've now learned about this film makes, be it briefly, what do you think should be the future of an organisation like this film makes? What do you think the craft community needs, and what changes
That is a tough one, because I still don't know that much about what you do, but I think what you're doing is great. I think it's so important to encourage people of all demographic groups to participate in meaningful work. I really appreciate that on your website you have people of different, you have girls or women of different races and cultural backgrounds. I love that. It's hard because at my point of life, I just look back and I see how much has changed. I think that things are so different now from 40 years ago. There is the trades and craft work in general, there's so much more appreciation of the many dimensions of that work, and they've been brought out of this association with just like dirty, meaningless work that animals could do. But it's clear that women around the world still are in need of encouragement and opportunities. I am afraid that politically in the United States, things are apparently going to become harder for women than they have been the last few decades. And so I would just say, I look forward to seeing what you continue to do. And the more that you profile women who are capable and finding a way forward and providing examples of, the more you normalize women in the trades or any fields that are productive and important, and that includes child rearing, frankly, the better the world is going to be.
Well, I will take that all on board and just keep doing what I'm doing. So, okay, that comes to the end of my list of questions. So thanks so much for agreeing to have the interview. It's really good to speak to you.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.